awesome, inspiring terror, weird.
Many of those who witnessed the first atomic explosion reported that it was an awesome sight.
Debris. Ruins, fragments.
After her house had burned to the ground, Mrs. Wiley searched through the debris for her valuable jewelry.
Dispersed. Scattered, spread, broken up.
The fluffy seeds of the milkweed are dispersed by the wind.
Eruption. Bursting out.
Fred had been known for his gentle ways, so his friends were stunned by the eruption of angry words that issued from him.
Puny. Weak, unimportant.
We were surprised by the puny resistance put up by the voracious tiger to its capture.
As broad as it is long. It makes very little difference.
Since both jobs pay $7.25 an hour and are equally boring, it is about as broad as it is long whether I take one or the other.
The explosion of Krakatoa. There are few sights that are more impressive and awesome than the eruption of an active volcano. There are few natural events that so singularly dwarf man's puny attempts to control his environment. Perhaps the greatest volcanic eruption of modern times took place in 1883 when the island of Krakatoa in Indonesia blew up as the result of a volcanic explosion. An enormous tidal wave resulted that proved catastrophic to the nearby coasts of Java and Sumatra. New islands were formed by the lava that poured out, and debris was scattered across the Indian Ocean for hundreds of miles. Volcanic material, dispersed 17 miles into the atmosphere, created startlingly beautiful sunsets for years afterwards.
Week 25, Day 2. Obliterate. Erase, wipe out.
No matter how one tries to delete material from a computer, it is almost impossible to obliterate it.
Deplorable. Sad, pitiable.
The hometown fans thought the umpire's decision was deplorable.
Initiate. Start, set going.
She could not imagine how she was going to get him to initiate a conversation about marriage.
Conflagration. Great fire.
Who could imagine a more bizarre story than the one having to do with a cow causing the conflagration in Chicago?
Rue. Regret.
You will rue that display of histrionics when I asked you to help.
Blow hot and cold. Swing for and against something.
I told Charlie to give up his summer job and come cross-country biking with us. He's blowing hot and cold on the deal at this point.
A universal danger. Man's ability to obliterate life on this planet has increased at a rapid rate. We are now faced with the deplorable prospect of new weapons that can cause destruction of life and property on a scale far beyond our imagination. No matter who takes the first step to initiate a conflict, the possibility exists that the conflagration will spread and envelop the world. Much thought has been given to ways and means of preventing this catastrophe. Some consider it mandatory that the nuclear powers seek agreement on methods of limiting and controlling these weapons, for in the absence of such an agreement, we may rue the day atomic energy was made practical.
Week 25, Day 3. Congenial. Sympathetic, agreeable.
The tree in front of my house has the dubious honor of being the spot voted the most congenial by the dogs of the neighborhood.
Hoard. Hide, store, accumulate.
Isn't it a pity we can't hoard the ideal days of autumn?
Sage. Wise man, philosopher.
A man may be a sage everywhere, but at home he's called a square by his youngsters.
Aegis. Shield, protection, sponsorship.
It was fortuitous that at the last moment the mayor offered the aegis of his office in finding a solution to the problem.
Detriment. Injury, damage, hurt.
A settlement that causes detriment to neither side is imperative.
In the doldrums. In a bored or depressed state.
Mary has been in the doldrums since her best friend moved away.
Taken for granted. The presence of an ever-flowing supply of fresh, clean water is taken for granted. Unfortunately, this congenial condition is fast disappearing. As our population increases, as industry consumes more water each year, the level of our underground water supply sinks measurably. There is no way to hoard water, there are many ways to conserve it. During a particularly dry spell, New York City found its reservoirs going dry. Only then did the residents begin to heed the sage advice, to limit the wasteful uses of water. Under the aegis of the Water Commissioner, citizens were encouraged to develop habits that would save water. The continued imprudent waste by each of us of this most basic resource, will work to the detriment of all.
Week 25, Day 4. Longevity. Long duration of life.
Scientists have placed the longevity of the planet Earth unbelievably into the future.
Imbibe. Drink.
If you imbibe, don't drive.
Virile. Masterful, manly.
The boys struck virile poses to attract the girls on the beach.
Senile. Infirm, weak from old age.
Far from being senile, the old woman was considered the sage of the neighborhood.
Doddering. Trembling, shaking.
It was deplorable for us to see her doddering around the house with the aid of a cane.
Burn the midnight oil. Study or work late into the night.
If I'm going to pass the test tomorrow, I will have to burn the midnight oil tonight.
An ageless story. Every so often we can read about a man or woman who has reached an age far beyond the limits we ordinarily expect. Reports of a man in Chile, or a woman in Turkey, who has celebrated the 105th or 110th birthday occur regularly. The natural question is, to what do these people owe their longevity? Frequently, the answer concerns the fact that the ancient one liked to imbibe regularly of some hard liquor. The photograph will show an apparently virile man or robust woman. Somehow, people who reach this advanced age seem to remain eternally sturdy. There are no signs that they have become senile. Smoking a pipe, or sewing on some garment, these rare specimens of hardy humanity are far from the doddering folk we expect to see.
Week 26, Day 1. Lethargic. Lazy, indifferent.
We are all susceptible to a lethargic feeling after a heavy meal.
Prevalent. Prevailing, common, general.
Long hair among boys is so prevalent today, there is no longer a prohibition against it in most schools.
Paramount. Supreme, foremost.
A good politician seeks the paramount issue in his community.
Remiss. Careless, negligent.
We would be remiss if we overlooked the importance of the Internet to the interchange of ideas and information.
Hostile. Antagonistic, angry.
The audience became extremely hostile when the bigot began to attack minority groups.
To split hairs. To make fine distinctions.
The mother and child spent a great deal of time arguing about the hair-splitting question of whether going to bed meant lights out or not.
Informing the public. Public opinion has an important place in a democracy. The public, often lethargic, is susceptible to a wide variety of influences. The most prevalent of these is the mass media. These communications media, the press, radio, and television, have a paramount position in initiating, influencing, and shaping public opinion. Bearing this responsibility, the mass media are often accused of being remiss in their duty to inform the public. There has been a great deal of hostile comment leveled against these opinion molders.
Week 26, Day 2. Rebuke. Criticize, reproach, reprimand.
Many a husband has been given a rebuke for having imbibed too fully at an office party.
Aversion. Strong dislike, opposition.
The female aversion to mice is considered absurd by boys.
Evince. Show plainly, exhibit.
Youngsters often do not evince any curiosity about the lives of their parents or grandparents.
Vogue. Fashion.
Good manners are always in vogue.
Superficial. On the surface, slight.
After a superficial examination of the injured motorist, the doctor said that hospitalization was imperative.
To strike while the iron is hot. To take an action at the right moment.
As soon as John heard that his father had won in the lottery, he struck while the iron was hot, and asked for an increase in his allowance.
The lack of foreign news. The critics rebuke the press for the fact that most newspapers devote somewhat less than 10% of their news space to foreign items. In many hundreds of papers, this falls below 2%. Why is there this aversion to foreign news? Newsmen claim that readers evince no interest in foreign affairs. In order to increase reader interest in foreign news, the vogue among editors is to sensationalize it to the point of distortion. Many other papers do only the most superficial kind of reporting in this area.
Week 26, Day 3. Jettison. Throw overboard, discard.
The pilot decided it would be imprudent to jettison his fuel over the populated area.
Inevitable. Sure, certain, unavoidable.
It is inevitable that children question what their elders accept as tradition.
Lucrative. Profitable.
Each year the contracts offered to star sports figures become more lucrative.
Tussle. A rough struggle.
Our conscience must always tussle against our yearning for what we know is taboo.
Intrinsic. Essential, natural, inborn.
Man sets the price of gold, it has no intrinsic value.
Once in a blue moon. On a very rare occasion.
His wife complained that they go out to dinner and a show once in a blue moon.
Playing it safe. The average newspaper office receives many times the amount of foreign news than it has space to print. The editor must include or jettison items as he sees fit. It is inevitable that his ideas of what the reader want to know, or should know, are decisive. Because the newspaper owners do not want to endanger a lucrative business, there is the constant tussle between personal opinion and the desire not to offend too many readers or advertisers. It is intrinsic to the operation of all mass media that they avoid being extremist in their news coverage or editorials.
Week 26, Day 4. Acute. Sharp, keen, severe.
After the catastrophe, there was an acute need for emergency housing.
Gist. Essence, main point.
She tried to get the gist of her message into a 25-word telegram.
Transient. Passing, short-lived, fleeting.
The young lover was susceptible to transient feelings of jealousy when he saw his sweetheart dancing with his best friend.
Terse. Concise, brief, compact.
The mayor made a terse statement, in which he rebuked his election opponent for making a contemptuous accusation.
Cogent. Forceful, convincing, persuasive.
The best debater makes the most cogent presentation.
Sleep on it. Postpone a decision while giving it some thought.
He didn't want to show his hand immediately, so he agreed to sleep on it for a few more days.
A favorite news source. The electronic media, television and radio, have more acute problems than does the press when it comes to news reporting. A normal broadcast can cover only a small part of a news day. The object is to transmit the gist of a story, without supplying its background. Another difficulty of electronic news broadcasting is its transient nature. The viewers or listeners may miss an important story, if their attention wanders. On the other hand, because radio and television present news in a more terse and exciting way, they are accepted as the most cogent presentation of news, and are preferred and believed above newspapers by most people.
Week 27, Day 1. Pinnacle. Summit, peak, top, crown.
The pinnacle of fame and success is often a transient stage.
Array. Arrangement, system.
The president faced an imposing array of reporters.
Obscure. Unknown, lowly, unclear.
Space telescopes are making our obscure planets ever clearer.
Ardent. Passionate, eager.
The ardent baseball fan went to every home game.
Culminate. Reach the highest point.
The party will culminate with the award for the most original costume.
To break the ice. To make a beginning, to overcome stiffness between strangers.
All after-dinner speakers break the ice by telling a story or joke at the start of their speeches.
A musical world. Music reached its pinnacle in the 19th century. Every leading nation produced its share of great composers. There was a bewildering array of national schools and musical styles, as the once obscure musician came into his own. Music became a widespread and democratic art. The ardent music lover turned to Vienna as the music center at the beginning of the 19th century. However, Paris was not far behind, especially in the field of operatic music. As the century progressed, the Germans became paramount in orchestral and symphonic music. The growth of German music can be said to have culminated with Ludwig van Beethoven.
Week 27, Day 2. Constrict. Limit, bind, squeeze.
It is imprudent for a youngster to constrict her circle of friends so that there is no opportunity to meet new people.
Prodigy. Marvel, phenomenon.
There is universal wonder when some prodigy appears on the stage to perform at the age of 4 or 5.
Bereft. Deprived of.
The catastrophe left him bereft of all his possessions.
Falter. Stumble, hesitate, waver.
Though he knew well the danger involved, the knight did not falter as he entered the dragon's cave.
Exultation. Triumphant joy.
She was filled with exultation when she learned her SAT score was near the maximum.
Loaded for bear. To be well prepared.
When the enemy finally attacked the positions, the defenders were loaded for bear.
A giant composer. Beethoven was able to free music from the traditions that had tended to constrict it. He was a child prodigy who held an important musical post at the age of 14. He was a successful concert pianist, but when his health began to fail, he turned to composing. Even though bereft of hearing at the age of 49, he did not falter in his work. Some of his later compositions reflect his sadness with his physical condition, but they also evince an exultation about man and life.
Week 27, Day 3. Vitriolic. Biting, burning.
The vitriolic language, used by critics of the new play, tended to obliterate its good qualities.
Invective. Insulting, abusive speech.
It is difficult to keep invective out of our discussion about the enemy.
Besmirch. Soil, stain, dim the reputation.
The candidate tried to besmirch his opponent's record.
Voluminous. Bulky, large.
One has to be amazed at the voluminous amount of information that can be stored on a computer chip.
Retrospect. Looking backward.
In the future we will, in retrospect, regard today's bizarre behavior as quite ordinary.
To bring down the house. To cause great enthusiasm.
Popular entertainers can be counted on to bring down the house at every public performance.
A worthy successor. A successor to Beethoven was Johannes Brahms. Also a prodigy, he was the object of vitriolic attacks by other composers, because of the individuality of his work. They heaped invective upon him, for the intensely emotional quality, and Germanic style of his writings. However, it was impossible to besmirch his talents for long, and he was soon one of the most popular composers in Europe. He produced voluminous varieties of compositions. Today, in retrospect, his originality is appreciated, and he is placed among the top Romantic composers.
Week 27, Day 4. Egotist. A vain, conceited person.
However, we should not be surprised that an award winner is an egotist about his or her performance.
Humility. Humbleness, modesty, meekness.
We all expect humility from the actors and actresses who win the Academy Awards.
Pungent. Sharply stimulating, biting.
The pungent odor of burning leaves marks the autumn season.
Inveterate. Habitual, firmly established.
Doctors agree that it is imperative that inveterate smokers give up that imprudent habit.
Adamant. Unyielding, inflexible.
The umpire was adamant about his decision to call the runner out.
To pull one's weight. To do a fair share of the work.
Everyone in a pioneer family had to pull his or her own weight.
Gruff but likable. In his private life, Brahms was considered by his friends as an egotist. He had an extremely lofty opinion of himself and his talents. He was not noted for his humility. Along with this quality, Brahms was known for his pungent sense of humor. While his closest friends could accept his biting jokes, others found him difficult to warm up to. Brahms was an inveterate stay-at-home. Cambridge University conferred an honorary degree upon him, but he was adamant about staying at home, and did not go to receive the honor. Despite the ardent and romantic nature of his music, Brahms never found the right girl, and remained single throughout his life.
Week 28, Day 1.